You're not always going to feel like doing the hard things. That's just the reality. The mistake most people make is that they wait for motivation to show up before they take action. They think, once I feel ready, I'll study. Once I feel inspired, I'll stick to my plan. But that moment rarely comes, and if it does, it disappears just as quickly. If you rely on emotion, you will fail to be consistent. If you wait for the perfect mood, you will watch days slip through your fingers. Real consistency starts with the understanding that discipline is not a feeling, it's a choice. You decide to show up. You decide to follow through. Not because you're excited or because it's easy, but because you've made a commitment to yourself that your actions will no longer be controlled by your mood. That shift in mindset is everything. It's what separates the people who make progress from the ones who stay stuck. The truth is, your brain is not wired to make you feel good about doing difficult things. In fact, it's designed to conserve energy and seek comfort. So when you feel resistance, that's normal. That's biology. But that doesn't mean you obey it. You don't need to feel like studying to study. You don't need to feel motivated to do what matters. You need to act first. Action comes before motivation, not the other way around. And what happens when you act first is powerful. When you push through that internal resistance, when you choose to follow the plan instead of your feelings, you begin to shift the way your brain responds. You're teaching it that discomfort is not danger, that discipline is safe, and that showing up, even when it's inconvenient, is part of who you are. What people forget is that momentum doesn't begin with energy, it begins with effort. That first step you take, especially when it feels hard, is what initiates the process. And once you start, everything begins to shift. Dopamine kicks in not from sitting around thinking about your goals, but from making progress toward them. That's how motivation is built, not found. So you have to force it in the beginning. You have to override the part of you that says, not now, or I'll do it later. You have to treat that voice like background noise and take the step anyway. And if you do that enough times, something incredible happens. Your brain starts to adapt. You become more resilient to discomfort, more willing to face the challenge, and more likely to act without hesitation. This is how consistency is born, not from hype or emotional highs, but from the small, repeated decisions to act in spite of how you feel. And that's what builds real confidence, not fake positivity, not pretending everything's easy, but knowing deep down that you have the power to move forward no matter what state. Because that's what it really means to be consistent. It's not about being robotic or never making mistakes. It's about developing a relationship with yourself that says, I can trust you to show up. That's powerful. That's transformative. It means you stop negotiating with yourself. You stop giving your feelings a vote. You stop letting your impulses dictate your actions. And you start leading your own mind. You don't need more motivation. You need to practice doing the thing even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, because that's the exact moment your brain is learning something crucial, that you are in control. Force yourself to be consistent, not because it's easy, but because it changes who you are. When people think about consistency, they often frame it as a matter of willpower. They assume that those who stay consistent must have some superhuman level of discipline, some internal force that the rest of us are just missing. But that's not how it works. Consistency isn't about willpower. It's about understanding how the brain actually functions. If you want to be consistent, you need to work with your biology, not against it. Your brain is designed to adapt to what you do repeatedly. That's how habits are formed, through repetition, through action that becomes familiar over time. Every time you engage in a behavior, your brain is watching. It's forming connections. Neurons that fire together wire together. So if you keep doing the same thing at the same time in the same context, Your brain eventually stops questioning it. It just does it. It becomes automatic. Now, in the beginning, that repetition will feel unnatural. Of course it will, because you're going against the grain of your current wiring. That's why starting a new habit feels uncomfortable. Your brain doesn't recognize it yet. It sees it as unfamiliar, and the unfamiliar always triggers resistance. But here's the key. That resistance is not a stop sign. It's a signal that you're trying to build something new, and that's good. That's the territory you want to be in. You have to be willing to repeat the behavior even when it doesn't feel natural, especially then. Because every time you repeat it, your brain is adapting. It's laying down a new neural pathway. It's saying, okay, this seems important. Let's make this easier next time. That's how automaticity is born. Not through some mental breakthrough, but through structured, repeated exposure. So if you want to become consistent with your studying, your learning, your focus, don't wait for it to feel easy. Create a rhythm. Anchor the behavior to something stable in your day. Same time, same place, same order. This isn't about rigidity. It's about reliability. You're giving your brain a predictable pattern to follow. And when the brain knows what to expect, it stops resisting. And here's the thing, repetition doesn't just make behavior easier, it also makes it more rewarding. Each time you complete a consistent action, your brain begins to associate it with a sense of progress. That's where dopamine comes in. Not from scrolling, not from fantasizing about goals, but from actually doing the thing again and again. That chemical reinforcement strengthens the habit loop. It starts to feel good to stay on track. That's when you know it's working. There's a window of friction when you're forming a new habit. It might be a few days, maybe a couple weeks. That's the time to stay locked in to protect your pattern, because once your brain adjusts, it gets easier, dramatically easier. You're not dragging yourself through it anymore. You're being pulled by the momentum you've created. That's how mastery begins. And the best part, once you've built one habit this way, it becomes easier to build the next. You've trained your brain to learn structure, and that structure becomes transferable. It becomes who you are. You become the kind of person who follows through. Not by chance, not by talent, but by design. So the next time you're frustrated that you're not feeling it, remember, it's not supposed to feel perfect. Your brain isn't looking for intensity, it's looking for frequency. Repetition, over and over until it becomes part of you. That's how you build consistency. That's how you win long term. Repeat until it's automatic. Most people set goals, and that's good. Goals give you a direction. They give you something to aim at. But here's what most people don't realize. Goals are not what create consistency. Systems do. A goal says, I want to study 2 hours a day. A system says, at 6 p.m., I sit down at the desk, put my phone in a drawer, and open my textbook. See the difference? One is an intention. The other is a plan. One depends on how you feel. The other is what you do automatically. The people who stay consistent aren't the ones who have the biggest goals. They're the ones who build the best systems. A system removes the need to make a decision every time. Because the truth is, the more decisions you have to make, the more mental energy you burn. And when your brain gets tired, it looks for comfort. It looks for shortcuts. That's when you slip. That's when you say, just one more scroll, or I'll do it tomorrow, and then you're off track. But if you've already built a system, if the time, place, and structure of your action are locked in, there's nothing to think about. You're not negotiating with yourself anymore. It's just what happens. It becomes part of your day like brushing your teeth. You don't overanalyze it. You don't resist it. You just do it. That's what you want. You want to make the behavior so structured, so obvious that not doing it would actually feel strange. And the way you do that is by removing variability. Your system needs to be consistent in time and space. That means the same time each day. That means a consistent location. That means a ritual, something you do right before that tells your brain it's time to lock in. Let's say your goal is to become a more focused learner. The system isn't be more focused. That's vague. The system is every morning at 8 a.m., I go to my desk, put my phone on airplane mode, open a blank notebook, and write the top 3 things I need to learn. Then I start with number 1 and work in 25-minute blocks with short breaks. That's a system, it's trackable, it's repeatable, and more importantly, it eliminates friction, because friction kills consistency. Every time you have to decide when to start, where to work, or what to do, you're introducing friction. The system is what removes all of that. It creates a smooth path. Your brain knows what's coming, and that certainty lowers resistance. You're not guessing, you're not searching, you're And systems aren't just about productivity. They build identity. Every time you follow the system, you're casting a vote for the kind of person you want to become. That identity compounds. You begin to see yourself differently, not as someone who's trying to be disciplined, but as someone who is consistent by design. Of course, the system won't be perfect every day. Life happens, you'll miss, you'll get off track. But when you have a system, it's much easier to reset. You don't have to rebuild motivation from scratch. You just return to the routine. You don't panic. You just plug back in. That's why systems matter. They give you structure when your mood is low. They give you clarity when your mind is scattered. And over time, they give you results without burning you out. Because consistency doesn't come from intensity. It comes from repetition inside a system that's built to last. If you want to be consistent, don't just set the goal, build the machine that makes the goal inevitable. Most people underestimate how much their environment is influencing their behavior. They think success is just about grit, willpower, or wanting it badly enough. But here's the truth. Your environment is either making consistency easier or it's constantly making it harder. And if you're serious about being consistent, you have to learn how to control your surroundings instead of letting them control you. Because even with the best intentions, if you keep putting yourself in high friction environments, ones filled with distractions, clutter, and triggers that pull you off course, you're going to lose. Not because you're weak, but because your environment is stronger than your willpower over the long run. The brain is always scanning for cues, and the more friction or temptation it sees, the harder it is to stay on track. So the key is this: reduce the friction for the behaviors you want and increase the friction for the ones you don't. Make the path to consistency smoother, not steeper. For example, if your goal is to study every evening, don't leave it up to chance. Set the scene. Keep your desk clear. Prepare your materials ahead of time. Make sure your study space is quiet and consistent. That way, when the time comes, you're not wasting energy trying to create the moment. You've already prepared it. On the flip side, if distractions are killing your focus, make them harder to access. Put your phone in another room or lock it in a drawer. Turn off notifications. Use website blockers. You're not trying to prove how strong you are. You're engineering your space so that staying consistent requires less effort. You're removing the traps before they catch you. This kind of design matters more than people think. It's not about being obsessive, it's about being strategic. You're building an environment that aligns with your intentions. Because here's the thing, the environment always wins over time. If your room is chaotic, if your phone is buzzing, if you're always trying to study in the same place where you relax or eat or scroll, your brain gets confused, doesn't know what mode to enter. But when you associate a space with a specific behavior over and over, it becomes a cue. The moment you sit there, your brain shifts into that mode. You've created a mental shortcut through physical structure. This is how elite consistency is built, not just by pushing through resistance every day, but by making it easier to do the right thing and harder to do the wrong one. You're shifting the odds in your favor before the moment even arrives. Even small tweaks can have a massive effect. Put your book on your chair so you have to move it before sitting down. Lay out your materials the night before. If you want to write more, open the document first thing in the morning so it's waiting for you. You're creating momentum before you even begin. That way, by the time your brain starts looking for excuses, you're already in motion. And over time, these little environmental shifts stack up. They create consistency, not because you suddenly became more motivated, but because you removed the daily decision-making that drained your energy. You made it easier to succeed than to slip. So don't just try harder, design better. Adjust the space around you until it supports your standards, not your sabotage. You don't need more strength, you need fewer obstacles. And when your environment supports your discipline, consistency stops being a struggle and starts being automatic. Make your environment work for you, not against you. The brain craves progress. It's not just a nice idea, it's a biological reality. When you see evidence that you're moving forward, even in small ways, your brain rewards you. It releases dopamine, a chemical that reinforces behavior and keeps you coming back. The problem is, most people wait for big wins before they let themselves feel that reward. But real consistency isn't built on big wins. It's built on the small steps you track every single day. This is why visual tracking is such a powerful tool. When you can see your effort, when you mark the habit, log the session, check the box, you're giving your brain something tangible to celebrate. And that small moment of recognition sends a message: what you're doing matters. It's working. Keep going. Think about how powerful that is. We live in a world where feedback is everywhere. Likes, comments, views, but those things are external and they're unpredictable. What you need is internal feedback. And one of the most effective ways to create that is through visible proof of consistency. It could be as simple as a calendar where you put a red X on every day you follow through. That little red mark isn't just ink, it's momentum. It's a signal to your brain that you're becoming someone who shows up. And once you see those marks start to build, something shifts. You don't want to break the streak. You don't want to start over. You become invested in the identity you're building one day at a time. That's the beauty of visual progress. It turns an abstract goal into a concrete reality. You don't just feel like you're being consistent, you can see it. And the more you see it, the more driven you are to keep it alive. But here's where most people go wrong. They don't track the process, only the outcome. They only feel successful when they hit the big target, the grade, the milestone, the project completed. But by that time, they've ignored hundreds of smaller wins that actually mattered more. The process is what counts. If your goal is to study for an hour each day, then checking off that study session is the win. Whether you mastered the content that day or not doesn't matter nearly as much as the fact that you showed up. That's how consistency is built, by valuing the act of showing up as the victory. And this isn't about perfection. You'll miss days. You'll get thrown off. That's part of the game. What matters is how quickly you re-engage. That's why tracking matters so much. It gives you a point of return. When you're lost, the habit tracker, the journal, the checklist, they show you the way back. They remind you of your pattern and they help you reclaim it. It's also a way to override your own memory. Because let's be honest, when you're in a slump, your brain loves to tell you a story like you never stick with anything. But if you've been tracking your consistency, you can look back and say, actually, I did. For 12 days straight, I've done this before. I can do it again. That kind of evidence quiets doubt. It shifts your self-esteem from someone who tries to someone who does. And over time, this creates a deeper shift. You're not just checking boxes anymore. You're training your brain to associate effort with reward. You're building a system where progress feels good, where showing up becomes satisfying, and where the act of doing the work is its own motivation. So if you're serious about consistency, don't just do the work, track it. Make it visual, make it obvious, make it rewarding. Let your brain see the proof. Because when progress is visible, consistency becomes unstoppable. Track it to reinforce it. There's a moment in every consistent journey where things stop feeling exciting. The novelty wears off, the motivation fades, and you're left with the grind. That's the point where most people check out. They think something's wrong. They think they're burned out or uninspired or maybe not cut out for it. But what they don't realize is that this moment, this exact stretch of boredom or repetition, is where the real work begins. Consistency doesn't live in the peaks. It lives in the plateaus. It's easy to show up when things feel fresh or rewarding, but when everything starts to blend together, when progress slows and the emotional highs are gone, that's when most people stop. Not because they failed, but because they misread the process. The brain naturally seeks novelty. It's wired to respond to change, to chase what's new. But building something meaningful, whether it's a skill, a routine, or a new version of yourself, requires staying locked in even when nothing seems to be changing. That's where long-term gains come from, not from intensity, but from endurance. Not from being entertained, but from staying engaged in the silence. You have to make peace with the plateau. You have to learn to show up without needing it to feel magical. The truth is, when things get repetitive, you're probably getting close to a breakthrough. That's the part no one talks about. Progress often happens right after things start to feel stale. But most people never reach that point because they mistake the boredom for a signal to quit. It's not. It's a signal to double down. This is where identity really starts to form. When you act in alignment with your system and your habits, even when you don't feel like it, you're casting the most powerful votes for who you are. You're becoming someone who doesn't just chase results, but someone who honors process. That's what transforms temporary effort into lasting character. So if you're stuck in that stretch right now, if the days feel monotonous and progress feels invisible, just know this is the proving ground. This is where most people turn back. But if you can learn to keep going in the quiet, in the repetition, you separate yourself from the crowd. You move from being someone who starts strong to someone who finishes. Someone who lives consistent, not just in motivation, but in identity. Endure the plateau. It's where consistency turns into transformation. So when we talk about forcing yourself to be consistent, we're not talking about grinding blindly or pushing through with sheer willpower. We're talking about understanding how your brain works and using that knowledge to build structure, repetition, and momentum. You create systems, shape your environment, track your progress, and show up even when it's boring. You don't wait for motivation, you design behavior. And over time, that behavior becomes identity. That's the real power of consistency. Not a burst of energy, but a quiet commitment repeated daily until it rewires who you are. Consistency isn't a feeling, it's a decision. Make it daily.